coming round with me, is he?
Yep.
So hi everyone, I'm Jemma Simpson. I'm founder of Diverse Talent AI. We have been operating now for just nearly 2 years. But 2 years next week is our birthday. And our backgrounds for over a decade has been in recruitment and HR. But with COVID and the pandemic and everything else changing, we decided to begin a new wave of recruitment solutions to support diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So Diverse Talent was born really from my personal experience being a queer woman in the workplace, where I was like, okay, if I'm looking for a new job opportunity, where can I find really good employers? There is no one marketplace. If you go onto a job board, you have to maybe scroll through different opportunities and then go on to their career section, and then you might just see a blurb at the bottom saying, oh, we're a diverse and inclusive employer, and then that's it. So we, instead of developing a new online platform where it'll allow job seekers to connect directly with employers that are explicitly invested in DE&I, and how we do that is by auditing employers before they can get onto the platform. So they need to actually showcase us what are their values, what are their mission, what is their employer benefits, culture, everything that we want to know before we make a decision and actually applying for a new role. And we all live in that little blue room down there. We've been part of Raise Ventures for just over a year nearly as well. It was another birthday I've missed. And it's been a tremendous success for us since we've joined here. We have quadrupled our team since we've moved into Raise Ventures. And good thing to shout out for ourselves for next week. We're all going off to Dublin, as I've been nominated as a finalist in the Diversity in Tech Awards. Woo! Thank you. But that is just a really strong accolade to show how well our team have got together and built something in such a short period of time. And yeah, that's about us and what we're doing.
Amazing. Delighted to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for having me.
And Laura, you're very welcome as well.
Thank you very much. So my name is Laura Lavery, and I've come across today from PA Consulting. But by way of background, I guess in terms of my career, spent 10 years in hospitality before going anywhere near 9 to 5, which I absolutely loved. I love the people element of it, and that's really what I tried to find again then whenever I moved into a corporate world. So I spent the first few years in PwC doing sort of duties and stuff, and quickly realised that I had a passion for people and organisational culture and change and D&I and well-being and all sorts of things. So I ended up in a sort of internal comms and engagement role, but very quickly kind of leaned towards the inclusion and diversity side of things, and was leading the internal LGBT network for PwC, and then laterally the external working with Pride network for all of Northern Ireland, and primarily, to be fair, Belfast. And then took another, and it was like everything, you end up doing this off the side of your desk, and it kind of gets like this, and your day job just kind of has to squeeze. But and then ended up leading all of the people networks for Northern Ireland within PwC, and kind of leading a lot of the internal diversity inclusion training, kind of linking in the other initiatives that we were doing, so like our CSR, our well-being, things like that, making sure that they're all interlinked, and it was a key theme going through everything that we did. Moved to PA Consulting in May as the community and engagement lead for PA Digital in Northern Ireland. And PA Consulting, if you've not heard of it, it's a global company. Largest footprint is in the UK. Within Northern Ireland, we've got about 105, 110 people, of which 85 work in our digital part of the business. And that's definitely what we're looking to grow. Belfast will be our digital hub for PA Consulting. So in terms of my role, is really establishing ourselves as an employer brand here, but also more generally connecting in with the community, seeing where we can add value, be that to different community organisations, upskilling young people in schools, trying to promote, I suppose, diverse careers in tech, particularly in underrepresented groups. So trying to get more young women into tech, back to the LGBT, reaching out to Rainbow organisation to hear and our friends, seeing what we can do there. So lots of different ideas for things that we will be doing going forward. At the moment, we're still establishing that plan, but again, very much building in diversity and inclusion into everything that we're doing. And we have a couple of great networks. Networks are a real passion of mine, and have been for a long time, and I think they're really key to getting your diversity and inclusion strategy right. But there's a lot more can be done by way of training, events, getting leadership buy-in, and modeling the behaviours that you want to see. And I think particularly from an early stage, that's a really powerful thing. Like, you're at a great position now to be able to do all that.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So the reason that we've brought these experts together in the room and online to share their insight and their expertise with you is really to help you build the right foundations for your business as a startup founder. Get it right now at the earliest stage and create that inclusive culture from the beginning of this process. So just out of interest in the audience, how many founders do we have, or small business owners? Couple. Okay. Be very welcome to open up the floor to any questions that you do have throughout the session. By all means, just share, just shout out. But the one thing that I kind of wanted to address first off is diversity and inclusion and equality. There's so much to that. I mean, it has so many facets. It's a bit like, where on earth do you start? You know, how can you be inclusive of all when maybe it's very difficult to even acknowledge and identify who those groups are? So would you maybe talk a little bit about that and how you can be so, I suppose, all-encompassing and get it right for everybody?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'm sure all three of us will have our own ideas about it. And if I can try and share a bit of a picture in your mind for how we would describe DE&I, I'm starting off similar to that of building a house. Okay, so before you build a house and put in your windows and your furniture and everything else, what you need is your foundations. So before you can put on a lot of weight on top of those foundations, you need to have them and cemented in. And what those really are is your company values, your mission, your ethics, and some idea of where we want to grow upwards. So putting in those foundations initially with a real attitude towards, okay, we want to expand more females in the workplace, put that in. We want to have internal community groups. What do those look like? We want to invest in younger generations in the workplace, put that in. And that's your foundations. And then you start to actually be able to grow on top of those. So, but like Laura mentioned about expanding your network, going out into communities, learning the culture and the language of diversity is continually changing. If we look in the LGBT community right now, the flag itself is changing nearly every other year. Just before Pride, I had to run out and get the updated version. And as a lesbian, that could be even confusing for me. So you always have to keep your finger on the pulse to understand, okay, these are the new acronyms, these are the new terminologies, this is the new alphabet, this is the new flag, and so on. And that's just obviously for the LGBT community. There's also a major piece in talking about people of color and religion, especially in this country. There's not enough exposure in the other religions as well. It's the very traditional Christian ones, but actually we're a multicultural workforce. We have a strong Hindu and Buddhism and Jewish workforce here. And very few companies are ready to actually support those people in the workforce. So talking about my little diversity house, putting in the foundations first, mapping out where your ambition as a company and what you want to create, and then build on top of that with your knowledge, your learning, and your reach.
Brilliant. So it's really about setting out what you want to achieve from the offset and being cognizant of that and letting that influence and impact like how you behave as an organization then and operate. Yeah. Okay. Kufa, would you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think what Jemma said is absolutely correct. As a second-time founder, it's quite an interesting thing when you look at that journey and what happens now. But what I always also say, as part of putting those foundations in, that when you're sort of an early stage startup, you've got a lot of stuff that's going on at the same time. So don't feel under, it's about creating a shell, but also recognizing that this is going to evolve. And one of the things that I found in my last startup that we did is we tried to bring in things as the team was evolving as well. So you kind of had areas that the team themselves were passionate about as well, and kind of inclusive of that. So you had individuals who would want to champion, we want to bring in, much more earlier careers into our organization, and those individuals who champion what we're going to do to drive that kind of engagement, not just in our organization itself, but whoever else we're working as part of that supply chain as well. But you're absolutely right. It's got to be about having the foundations. And I say to everyone, walk the talk, right? So, if you're going to kind of set your bar in that way, make sure that it's things that you're going to be able to achieve. And remember, you can evolve and grow with it as you go along as well.
That's really interesting, because I think, as you say, Kufa, what a lot of founders struggle with is like resource, because you're spinning so many plates, and often things like perhaps culture can be kind of at the bottom of the pile, at the bottom of the to-do list with considerations. So it's really, really difficult to actually commit time to focusing on diversity and inclusion. So why would founders do that? I know we've kind of touched on it, but what are the benefits of creating an inclusive culture in your business?
Well, there's been heaps of research done on this, and I think there's lots of stats that you can kind of throw back in terms of like the increase in revenue whenever you have a more diverse board of directors or whenever you've got a more diverse workforce. But I think genuinely people are now looking more and more towards organizational culture as an indicator of the kind of people they want to work for, the kind of organizational family that they want to be a part of. And if you do not have a truly inclusive culture, people can go other places now and find that. So at a time when it's so tough to find, or rather to fight for the talent that's out there, I'm not saying there's a lack of talent, there's a lot of people looking for it. It's a real competitive advantage in talent attraction, but also for me, and a bit of a softie, but it's the right thing to do to make people feel like they're valued for every aspect of themselves, not that they're defined by their diversity characteristic that you're maybe providing for, but that they are welcome for that. And I think one of the things that, particularly whenever you look at talent attraction and bringing in different people, when you're bringing in, say 20 people who all come with the exact same route to entry, the exact same background, the exact same, employment history, that's going to be a very homogenous pool of thought as well. So whenever it comes to coming up with ideas or new ways of working, you're going to have the same answer 20 times. So if you're attracting a diverse range of candidates and creating an atmosphere where they feel like they can contribute everything that they've learned from right across, and it can be everything from their upbringing, their religious background, what their path to employment is. Like, I didn't come through a university route. I managed bars for 10 years and loved it, and then just got given a chance to join PwC then. But I think that diversity in its truest sense of thought and what comes with that means that it gives you a real competitive edge, because if you've got voices at the table that other people don't, then you're going to be a lot more innovative. And also for, depending on what your business is, for your end user, if you've got a voice at the table that represents them, you're not going to make silly mistakes in, your press releases and the way you're designing things, your, for example, your website or something like that. It's about representation, but it's also about making sure that you're getting it right, and to an extent avoiding silly mistakes as well that you would potentially make if there wasn't someone sitting at the table going, well, actually that wouldn't work for me and this is why.
Yeah, and especially what you mentioned there about that entry to the role, being recruiters. This is something that we've been involved with for several years. But think back as a manager, I've always debated and argued to remove the academia requirements from job descriptions. There is no need for somebody who is going for maybe a sales role to have a degree. It's about the passion, the drive, and their own self-learning. And certainly as a startup with diverse talent, out of all of our employees, only one has a HR degree. The rest of us actually will have experience in the industry where they fell into, or are learning on the job, and that's a lot better in my view anyways, than having somebody that's gone the academia route
100%.
and then went, okay, that's it, I'm going to be a HR manager for the rest of my life. Live a little, try a few things out, and then see where the next role is that's going to be best for you.
For sure. I think the technical stuff, generally speaking, you can teach, you can learn, be it on the job or through different courses. I think you can't teach passion, you can't teach natural strengths or a willingness to learn, or someone that's going to connect really well with people, or and that's why I think it is looking at those sort of different tools to fish in, rather for want of another turn of phrase, whenever you're looking for your candidates. That again is where you get your competitive edge, that potentially if someone's left school, done 4 years of university, and then is looking for a job, you don't necessarily have the same sort of experience to draw on.
And Kufa mentioned obviously about being a founder, you don't have the time or the resources or the people at all to pay close attention to your growth. It's kind of like, gosh, I need that skill set and I need it 5 months ago. But for our growth, we kind of very quickly analyze what is trainable, what can we train. And it turned out that we were able to open up the job to one particular job to a much wider talent pool, because we were confident in our own capabilities of training. And one of the people that we've hired became one of our best employees. Never worked in an office in their life. They had spent the last 20 years working in as a classroom assistant in special needs school, but they had that really good industry knowledge about neurodiversity, which we lacked. Even though we worked in recruitment and HR for so long. So bringing her into the business, we were able to learn from her, even though we were still teaching her. So it is about, okay, we may need to have that special person to help us, you know, propel the business further in the next 6 months, but actually what can you offer that other individual in return for their knowledge and their creativity?
I think everything you said there, and Laura, you touched on it. There's so many, as you said, stats that can be thrown into it. There's so much evidence that you can see, okay, you know, it's something we should be doing. But it seems to really all be about heart. Like it's about understanding that these are people that you're bringing into your organization, and they should be respected, and they should be working in an environment in which they feel comfortable and to contribute and to add value. At this point, I would open up to the audience. Does anybody have any questions for any of our speakers at the moment?
Yeah, sorry, what are the most effective actions you've taken to like help increase diversity or like inclusion?
Well, I'll
Go
start
ahead.
off with that. Just from a point of view, I think like so much around like culture and everything else, it's around listening to the people in your organization. I think, as I say, I'm a big fan of people networks. I think where a lot of organizations get it wrong is you do have a handful of passionate people leading these networks and doing their best with limited or often no resources, who have so much knowledge to impart on, you know, how to be more inclusive to, you know, a variety of different things, but they're doing it off the side of their desk. You know, the high level, you know, the headlines from the company are, we're really committed to diversity and inclusion. We want to commit, like, you know, we have all this training and everything else, but if you've got people in your organization that are really passionate about diversity, and I think training is a really big part, particularly around language, give them the resources, give them the role, make it a full-time role, let them lead on diversity. Or if you've got a women's network, or, you know, an LGBT network, or different religious networks, or ex-military, whatever it is, if there is a need for someone to lead on that, you know, commit one resource to it and listen to if they're saying, actually, my community within this organization needs this, or actually that last company-wide email that went out was really tone deaf because, or this is how you can support us right now, this challenging moment for our community. Listen, I think for me, that's the thing as well. I think staff-led networks are the way to go forward with it. Obviously, you've got all your HR policies as well, but I think that only works if leadership are really committed to listening, learning, and providing resources and time for that person to actually fulfill what they're setting out to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose for ourselves, like the top 3 that we would be recommending, and to ourselves as a startup business, but also we work with a lot of other startups and they're trying to build out their business. First one is to be visible as well. So it's wonderful to say, yeah, we're a really diverse and inclusive employer. What do you say? Like, are you going to the events? Are you going to networks? Do you have a charity partner? Are you going to get accredited? Maybe you're using the Cara Friend Business Charter, or being accredited by Diversity Market NI or B Corp. There are plenty of accreditation bodies out there that not just give you the badge, but will give you the toolkit. So you can work that into all areas of your business, from recruitment to promotions to employee well-being as well. So working on the visibility side, and why that's so important for us is we've actually seen, and again, just going through such a long time in the industry, since Diverse Talent launched and we have been visible and talkative about our values, I've noticed a significant increase on job seekers coming to us that are trans and have came from from a military background. So if you imagine in this country, coming from the RUC, they may have went, okay, I can't be sending my CV all around the houses because there's still that security element, which is unfortunate. But they know our values, they've seen our media, they've maybe spoken to us at all of the events that we can get ourselves to, that they can trust us with being their authentic selves through the recruitment process, and that we will represent them in a safe way. So visibility. The second one, as we've already talked about, is the learning. And like we mentioned there about the language. So look at your job descriptions whenever you're writing them. So is it neutral tone? Are you using maybe male dominated language? And that comes right through to software engineering as well, which is a big one because it's such a male dominated environment. And this isn't me male bashing by any means, okay? I'm just highlighting something here, but it is to ensure that whenever, you know, you've got people from other ethnicities or genders coming into what was maybe a male dominated or a white person's environment, that you're actually putting in those safeguards as well to say, look, we're changing, we're rebranding, we're trying. So this is the different structures that we have in place to support you. And then the third one really is about getting buy-in from all levels of your business. It's great to have these initiatives and, you know, events coming from HR or from, you know, the boss just walked in one day, read an article in the newspaper about productivity increases if you have more of these types of people in your business. No, you need to get absolutely everybody. So delegate it out to each individual in the business, whether they are working in finance or software engineering or product. Even in our case, we work with a lot of contractors as well. So people that are not on the payroll of diverse talent, but they're still part of the business. We still bring them in for coffees and get to know you and make them, you know, a part of our culture and ask for their buy-in as well.
Brilliant. And you've mentioned something that I'll come back to, but I want to hear from Kufa on what his top couple of tips would be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been kind of said already in essence, but one of the things I'd add here is I think Jemma mentioned that very briefly, but authentic, you know, be authentic in terms of what you're putting together. You know, you've got to show that this is really something that I believe in, and it's what we want to do as an organization. And then it's how do I kind of bed that into the actual culture as we go along in everything that we do, from a recruitment perspective, from how we communicate with our customers, our supply chain, everything becomes that. And I think, you know, when you look at the room that we're in now with founders, you know, I'm very much there. Hopefully, if anybody you talk to who's worked in either my, you know, my startups or being around me, they'll kind of say, you know, what you see is what you get regardless. So there's that kind of genuineness around this. I think the core part is value. So I think about my first startup and even what we're doing right now is that it's okay. One thing as a founder for me to say, look, these are the values we're going to have. And I use that to kind of bring in the people initially, but then it's about empowering the rest of the team to kind of drive those, because actually those values are then what helps us when we go through that recruitment process. And again, it helps sort of get our champions from that. So, you know, you find groups that are passionate about a certain area, and then you can kind of enthuse and encourage what's kind of taking place from there. I think there's a piece around actually, you know, when you talk about, I think the word around listening and communication, you know, that's a two-way thing, but a big part is the value that you put from the input. So when your team come to you and they want to kind of highlight something or focus on something, it's actually acting on that. So they, you know, they see that there's a real kind of buy-in from you as a founder and as a founding team to make sure that that's where you want to be as an organization. So yeah, be authentic is my biggest thing, and kind of make that the centerpiece of everything you do. That's your DNA. That's who you are.
Okay. Jemma, you mentioned something that's actually interesting. You mentioned that people you work with, say whether it's you know, employers that are, you know, diverse, and I know that you do extensive work in vetting them really to ensure that they are what they say. But for your typical startup founder, when they're working with, say, customers and suppliers and all of this different thing, how much do you think kind of their values of diversity and inclusion, you know, extend to that network in which they're working? You know, should they only work with certain people? Should they be vetting them? It would be interesting to hear your thoughts around that.
It's a really good question, because as a startup, obviously you're there to build something and to make money from it as well. So it's that question of, do you sell your values in order to pay your rent? A really good example would be most recently we had an organization approach us, one of the biggest employers in this country, in fact actually across the world, global, and they approached us to do recruitment for them and support them on hiring talent. And we actually said no. Would have lost us tens of thousands of pounds of business, and we have walked away from it because they have employees on a picket line, and they have you know, constantly in the news about underpaying their staff, and they're one of these employers that have a really diverse workforce, you know, a very multicultural workforce. And so, yeah, we had to make a very strong decision. Okay, do we want to take this money and so that we can actually reinvest it into the business and hire more people and do more with our product? Or do we want to actually stand by our values? And yeah, our ethics are everything to us. So it is a good question. And I really think it comes down to an individual founder. Like you said, and I know the kind of shared message here that is about heart. Can a founder be happy enough to sell a bit of their ethics in order to bring money in? It will just depend. Now, there is, of course, B Corp especially, and if anybody's not familiar with it, B Corp is a legally binding accreditation. It's probably one of the best available in the world. Tom and Jerry's ice cream is one of their thank you so much, Ben and Jerry's.
It's being recorded.
Yes, so Ben and Jerry's, the Body Shop, loads and loads of multinationals are signed up to this legally binding accreditation. It's huge in America. PwC actually now have a working group focusing on it because it is going to launch in the UK a lot bigger. But it's a really good tool and it's free to use to help founders to qualify their suppliers. So whenever you are going to buy a product, maybe you're a founder and you're having to go and purchase software or purchase paper or stationery, anything like that, it'll give you a good tool to assess, okay, well, what's their anti-slavery commitments, or what is the gender diversity in their board members, and it will help you to identify that, and it'll be then their call once they're informed.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I didn't even know that resource existed. Because I think certainly for founders, it's on a scale. Like, for example, your startup is, your ethos is diversity. Like it really is embedded in what you do and everything that you're about. If you're average Joe, maybe average Joes don't found companies, have to be a bit crazy to find companies, but for a startup founder who, as I said, doesn't have those resources, is trying to manage all of these different things at once. It really is about making the right decision for them at that time, and sometimes that might have to be using the tools like B Corp so that they can assess and make a more informed decision on whether they want to work with someone.
Yeah.
Certainly. That's very interesting. Did the the tips shared help? Did that?
Yeah, that's so interesting. Actually, I didn't realize we were diverse though, because we just signed up.
Emily?
No,
sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, very good. Brilliant. Sorry.
There you go. Me, I was
That's brilliant. Great to hear.
Very good. There you go. That's just testament to the work that Diverse Talent is doing. Does anybody else have any questions at the moment?
What did you said at the start where it's very easy to put a little thing saying we are diverse or whatever? I'm neurodivergent, so you would know, and some people have seen me before, and my whole startup is about creating a startup for neurodivergent people. And I see this time and again where I see, like, I've started a course at the moment, and I'll not say what college, but it says on the website award in autism or whatever. But I'm sitting in a class and some things that happened, I was kind of like, that's not adding up.
Yeah.
To me, like, it doesn't seem. And then I was talking, because I have some autistic friends and that, like, we talk a lot about these things at the moment, because I'm just curious to hear, like, their thoughts, because I don't want to speak for everyone with only my thoughts. I want to hear what other people are saying. And like we were just saying, was it neurotypicals that decided to give that award? Who was included in that? Like, who decided that award was the standard as well? And to us, it sort of felt like maybe neurodivergent people might not have been included in it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I was sort of met with a bit of a wall with like boundaries and video cameras always on and different things. And then I sort of had to explain, like, I can't always do that. I'm in burnout at the moment from masking way too much. And I made a promise to myself, I'm not going to do that anymore. And I can't lead by example if I hide those things too. So, but I just kind of met with an explanation as to why you make eye contact. So I was like, I'd have been doing that years ago if that worked. Sort of thing too. So they did respect it, but it just was interesting. You have that reward, but I'm still having to sort of assert things to a certain extent as well.
And I think that you're so right about, and that kind of circles back to having the right people in the room. Like, and if you have a room full of, as an example, straight white middle class men, writing all of your diversity policies and every, you know, everything that every diversity characteristic needs to flourish in the workplace. They've maybe gone and done a quick Google search and said, right, well, I know this. But if you have a truly diverse and inclusive workforce, and you can actually say, well, you know, I'm not going to get everything right straight off the bat, but you tell me your experience and you tell me your experience and what's going to help. And I think that I think that's a very key point with any kind of, you know, adjustments that we can make for people or anything, that any way that we're improving our processes, is if you don't get it right first time, keep asking, keep trying, and be open to criticism, because you deserve it. Is a weird way to phrase that, but you know, that's the only way that we improve, is if someone said, appreciate this, but you've got a lot further to go, and actually this is having an impact on me because, or I'm having to reduce my working hours because, or whatever it is. I think it comes back to that listening piece again. But I think you sort of, it's almost that circular piece that you this is why you need to have the diverse workforce, or the diverse, whatever it is in your organization, people that can advise you on this stuff. And I think where you don't have that and you're trying to be as inclusive as possible, go and speak to the people who know, like go and speak to organizations who specialize in how to support neurodivergent people in the workplace, or, you know, if it's from a religious background, seek someone out who knows actually what are the things that can make it easier to be in the office. Or, you know, it could be single parents, you know, can we provide something that makes it easier for them? Or obviously there's loads of different diversity characteristics. You'd be here all day going through them, but ask the people that are experts in it, because they live and breathe it every day, and believe them when they say that this is really unhelpful, this is helpful, and just keep trying. And if it doesn't work, knock it down and try again. But yeah, I think some of those, let's be honest, I think we all know some of the awards you can pay for. I don't think that sounds like it. I think that anything that actually rigorously asks those questions and understands what's helpful to people, like there's such value in that. But I think you can probably tell in some organizations where they maybe tick the box and sign something, and that's where they got their award.
That is a case. And I'm like, ask me anything about Northern Irish companies here, because yes, they're no shame, and I'll just hang them out to dry. There is a number of companies, yes, that have done that. They haven't paid for the accreditation. They've gone off and they've done the bare minimum to get it, to make themselves an attractive employer, because they know that diversity and inclusion sells. It attracts talent to the business, and that little badge icon somewhere on their website is going to, you know, entice people into sending an application. And I've spoken to internal recruiters and like, oh yeah, we only did that to try and get more talent. And I'm like, well, is it working for you? Because you're talking to me. So obviously you're not able to retain your employees, which is nearly a bigger battle than actually attracting talent as well. You have to retain your exactly. So you're quite right. Money or just, you know, for show. But it's that's, you know, suffragettes say it's deeds, not words. And it's okay, yeah, we've got the badge, now what do we do with it?
That's I think it's openness and it's listening. And I think for startup founders, it's also about giving yourself a bit of grace, because you're not going to get it all right the first time. You can't know, or the 10th time, because, you know, maybe in the case certainly of a lot of our Raise founders who have been through our accelerator program, it's the first time they've been a founder. It's the first time they've done anything like this, and so they're learning. And you kind of have to get it wrong a couple of times to get it right. But the important part is that you're listening and you're changing, you're adapting, and you're creating a better environment for the right reasons. And Jemma, I love that you went straight into the naming and shaming, because my next question was going to be, before we talk about some good examples that you've seen, I would love to hear if there are any horror stories that you've seen about diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Perhaps without
I'd actually love to hear that from you guys as well. You've experienced that, and like, what would you have done in that?
I had a client who was looking for an accountant to join their practice, and they wanted CVs of anyone with experience, so long as they weren't within childline age.
Wow.
Yep. That's just one example, but
You can see your feet.
Find a number of examples like that.
I think in terms of a common theme that I see, and with working youth co-chair and the Working with Pride network. Obviously, a lot of what we do is supporting LGBT networks within different organizations of various different sizes. And I've sort of referenced it before, but I think part of the issue that networks and people networks, as I say, it is kind of my area of focus, but that they consistently come up against is the good intentions at the start. You know, we're going to set up these networks, we're going to hand all the control over to you, we're going to listen to you, we're going to take your feedback. And as I referenced earlier, you've got people who are trying to do it off the side of their desk, but they're coming up against lack of resources, lack of leadership involvement, no buy-in from like maybe your central comms team and pushing stuff out, low attendance. If those people are doing that and getting no reward for it or no feedback from the business that there's an answer for this, I think that's where you're going to have people burn out. But I think leadership buy-in and listening is so important. And I do know of an example where there was an email that went out to, in a particular company, say 60 partners and directors saying, would you like to come to this particular event for 15 minutes on a Saturday? Just come and show your face, show your support. It was a Pride event. And of those 60, 70, whatever it was, partners and directors, not one leader in that business could be bothered to spare 15 minutes. And it's just so frustrating when, again, the headlines, the comms, the firm-wide emails and everything say we're so committed and, you know, happy LGBT History Month and everything else. So show up and show your people that it's important to you as well. And I think that role modeling piece is so important. Because you should genuinely as a leader be committed to these sorts of things, but it also creates that environment of psychological safety where if there are concerns, people, or not even concerns, I don't mean to make it so negative, but if there are ideas, if there are, this is how we could do it differently, this is something that could work, have we tried this? People feel that they can put their hand up because there's a genuine appetite to learn more and do better. So yeah, leadership buy-in, I think, is probably the key.
I think you're
I also think, hold on, that's right.
So I was just going to say, particularly in a startup environment whereby you can get it right for now, and you don't need leadership buy-in because you are the leaders and you create that environment, you create that safety. Sorry, Kufa, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was also going to say, I think, you know, Jemma probably said it from a recruitment perspective. I think the kind of the agenda and the movement has changed. So, you know, issues like this are really at the top of the tree. But when you consider that when I first got into recruitment 20 odd years ago, you know, if I think about the job descriptions we were writing, how we're going about recruiting, you know, I don't think we stand a chance today. So there's a bit of an evolution going forward. So I think, you know, at the moment, you know, if you look at it, we can kind of dissect into a lot of businesses and go, you know, if you look to their recruitment and hiring process, there's a number of challenges that they're facing. And the key thing is trying to focus on organizations that are genuinely trying to change how and what they do. You know, my experience has always been, I mean, as a Black man, it's always interesting, you know, as I call it. So it's the one when someone says to me, "Oh, I've got Black friends," as I call it, when actually it's irrelevant. It's the same thing about recruitment. It's that kind of thing that, oh, you know what, we're trying to bring more people of color into these kind of roles. And I personally sit there going, well, that shouldn't be the driver. The driver should be, we're trying to get the best and most talented and most suited individuals for this role, and their background is completely irrelevant. It's, you know, the question is, can you do this job and can you do it to the best of your ability? And yes, there has to be processes around that. So I think the key thing is, everyone's talking about, you know, communication is important, taking leadership, and as a founder as well, when you're setting up on yourself, you know, you can have how can I put it, a plan around how you're going to bring you know, certain aspects into your business. So we had an example where we were keen, we were open to whoever comes in, and we had a working mom, single mom, come into the business, and no matter what plan we had to build something that was bespoke to her needs, if that makes sense. And no matter how much the HR team kind of sat there and went, I think we can make it look like this, it was completely opposite to how it worked. So, you know, we kind of had a view that, you know, she'd want to finish work at 3, but actually she wanted to start later. Start the day later and finish later because she had help in between that. So flexibility, don't be too hard on yourself, lead by example. So champion the things that really mean the most to you, and just become that flag bearer until you get other people to carry on that flag as well.
And something that I believe every person in this room and every single person in the world of work should have some sort of basic understanding of employment law as well. and it's very easily accessible, and on a local level, when I'm speaking to other founders and helping them to develop their very first team, maybe even their very first hires, I'll spend no more than maybe 30 minutes doing a whistle-stop tour of here, this is your responsibilities as an employer. So yes, well done in building a startup, getting a product built and using your tech skills to do this, but if you're going to manage people, you're going to lead people, you need to be aware of what your actual legal responsibilities are. And again, particularly within this country with the 2010 Equality Act as well. And we were talking about maybe examples. A few years ago, I did work for another startup, and the founder said, okay, we want to be, the most recognized diverse employer in this country. We're going to get B Corp certified. We're going to be this, and this. I was like, great, okay. We went then and started looking for office space, and it was actually across the street as well, just over the flyover. They were looking at the office, and he said, right, I'm going to sign the deed. You're going to get this one. I said, well, actually, hold on a minute. There's only stairs in this building. There's no lift. And you would have to walk up 3 flights of stairs. Yeah. So you want to be the most diverse employer in the country. What about people with disabilities? Oh, well, that company in particular only lasted about 12 months until they had to cease operations. So it says a lot now. But there's a really good tool on nibusinessinfo.co.uk. It's a downloadable guide that is accessible to everybody. It's just on the platform, and it'll give you an idea of what the legalities and responsibilities are of an employer. Get to know it. Yeah. It's not going to take you long to read through it. Understand adoption leave, maternity leave, what is the enhanced maternity leave, sick pay. Going through the equality side, so for disabilities, neurodivergence, and for LGBT people in the office, and about, obviously that's all changed as well. If you imagine before 2010, my previous employer could have come in and went, you know what, actually you just don't fit into our culture because you're gay, so we're going to let you go. And I wouldn't have a leg to stand on because I had no legal protection until then. So do familiarise yourself with that if you're a founder trying to build from the ground up.
What's it called again?
nibusinessinfo.co.uk.
Happy to send out the resources that we've talked about to all you guys anyway afterwards.
And I think funny, just to sort of touch on, I suppose, the example of physical space. We've obviously focused a lot on kind of the role of an employer here and when it comes to inclusion and diversity, but it's also really important, like right across everything you do as a business, and obviously it'll depend what your business is, but if you've got, for example, a client coming into your office and you've got, your accessibility is not great, you've got no gender neutral toilets, if you've got someone who's coming in who's non-binary, or there can be any number of things, or if you're in a conversation, or if one of your people are in a conversation with a client and is maybe using outdated terminology that through lack of education they don't know, actually we don't do that anymore, we don't say that, or your comms that you're putting out on social media, or for likes of, if you're putting out stuff on LinkedIn and using hashtags, the likes of camel case, which makes it more accessible for people who are using software that reads out social media posts or stuff on there. They can't read lowercase hashtags that all runs together and stuff, like just making a little effort to get to know things like this. People appreciate it, and your clients will appreciate it as well, in whatever way that your clients interact with you. Anything that you do in terms of learning about inclusion, inclusivity, furthering that conversation, having that conversation embedded in everything you do. Again, from a business standpoint, if you look at your business case, that's it. I mean, that is part of your brand then, is not diverse because it looks good, we are the most diverse. It is, we actually care about doing the best for our people and your people. And inclusion is just a part of that, but it's a really important part. And hopefully, as you said at the start of the session, as more people become more educated in all of this, I don't think it'll ever get to the point where we're not talking about it. I think there'll always just be new stuff that'll, in 20 years time, we'll be baffled by it and trying to have our heads around it. But as long as there's still that kind of appetite to learn and to listen, I think we'll be okay. And I think the organizations that now aren't learning and listening, and particularly around flexibility, they'll be left behind. And I think those people will not be having that conversation because they'll not be around.
Yeah, that was really identified with COVID, how quickly the tech companies could say, no problem, everybody work from home.
Yeah.
That's all right, no worries. And solicitors firms were like, oh, hold on a minute, we have, 50-year-old filing cabinets here. Are you going to just put them in the back of your car or under the bus? Like, what are we going to do with all these filing cabinets? And they're still slowly but surely getting there. So it is, back to the house, putting in those foundations and readying yourself. Has anybody here ever had to approach their boss or their employer about making reasonable adjustments in the workplace or anything like that before?
Not quite that, but I wanted to touch on what you said about, when someone admits that, they've kind of messed up or effed up, and that was like not when I was working, but when I was at university, there was like so the course I was doing, there was only about 50 of us, but it was one of those like online timed tests when we were doing it, and they referred to East Asians as Orientals, which was like a really outdated term. So me and my friend just kind of messaged. We didn't even really know who to email because it was an automatic, like an automated testing. But we emailed like the head of the department being like, we saw that, we don't want to use that term anymore. And they came back to me with like they were really apologetic. They wanted to meet us in person. We met with the head of the department, and they were saying, so the person who wrote the automatic tests, he was an older gentleman who just didn't know, but then he met with us as well. And just the fact that they put that effort into it, like we were students, we weren't employers, but the fact that they actually went to that just for 2 people in a university of thousands, or tens of thousands, the fact that they did that like really made me appreciate it. So I think, like you said, like no, not everyone's gonna get it right. But like when you hold your hands up and you say, yeah, we messed up, that's when you're like, oh, it's fine, it's all right, because there was no malice behind it, because when the guy was talking about it, he just said, that's just a word he's always used because it was fine whenever he was younger, and he
my
was
grandparents,
our
like, it's awful.
So just the fact that they put that much effort to apologize and rectify it, really made a difference.
Well, that's it for me. That's how to do it right. It's admitting you've got it wrong and not. And I think the worst thing, and I've seen examples of this, thankfully not anywhere that I've worked, but I've seen examples of when someone's pulled up on their language, getting defensive and saying, well, actually, I'm allowed to say what. No, you're not. Or, you can, but I'll fire you.
The PC brigade.
The PC brigade, or we're being cancelled, whatever. It's not about that. It's about, it obviously, as you say, there's so much constantly evolving and new things that we're having to take into consideration. As I say, I've been doing diversity and inclusion and people networks and all this stuff for years. I still get it wrong, and I fully hold my hands up to that. But when I do get it wrong, when I say something wrong or don't think something the whole way through, like it's on me then to go and do my research and find that out. It's not, I think as well as getting defensive and saying, well, actually, I'm right, you're wrong, I am allowed to say that. The other thing is, and I think we saw a lot of this around sort of Black Lives Matter moment that really took some momentum. Everyone was going to their Black friends and colleagues and saying, can you please explain this to me? And it's not your Black friends and colleagues' jobs to educate you. There's enough resources out there. There's enough books. There's enough stuff that you can watch, read, and listen to. That's a lot of emotional labor to put on someone to explain everything to you.
Tell me your cultural history right now.
Don't fight it. Go and do your research. If there's someone who's willing to have that conversation or an expert you can speak to, that's their role, particularly in the realm of inclusion and diversity, go and speak to them. But I love that they actually then took the time to meet with you guys and say, right, well, sorry, and even if that's now something that's in their head, they'll go and review the rest of their materials and particularly everything this guy wrote maybe, but again, it's a learning moment, and I think it's, as you said earlier, the grace to kind of accept that you don't know everything, and even if you got to right now know everything, tomorrow it's going to change. So it's just constant persevering. I think that's why people that are really passionate about it tend to be people who are really into learning and growing, and the people that you tend to find that fight you on a lot of it are stuck in their ways across the board. And quite challenging.
And that was really, really well commended for you and your friend to actually speak up. And I think I mentioned to yourself as well about whistleblowing. It's not talked about enough. I know there's not just founders and there's employees as well, and it's about spreading awareness to employees. Do you know where to go if you do need to raise a concern or a question? not just in the workplace, but an actual ombudsman, I can never pronounce that word, or outside help. You know, literally 2 streets away is the Labour Relations Agency, which is open to everybody. And if you have an issue in your employment place, you go and you can speak to them, and they will give you the advice and the support. And whether that's going to mediation with your employer, or if perhaps it's a very serious grievance that you need to discuss as well. So it's about making sure as an employee and as an employer that both have the tools available to expand your knowledge and actually have the support there to know where to go to next.
Sure. What you mentioned about the hashtags, Laura, I didn't know. I would never have known. Did anybody else know that?
I know about the hashtags, but I'm aware of like how difficult it can be for someone who
Yeah.
maybe can't see or hear.
Yeah.
Accessibility is a big thing.
A bit big
Yeah,
time, and
okay.
it's something that I've only recently heard of because I have a friend who works in comms, and so it's for anyone who is visually impaired and needs, as I say, a text reader from their screen. If you can imagine a bit of, you know, this is where I show off my non-technical side, AI automation, I don't know, whatever you call it, the robots in your computer, trying to read like a hashtag that's maybe 5-6 words long, that's all lowercase, they see that as just a string of nonsense. And actually you can get, you know, demos of the software. Just try it sometime. Take like the top 10, maybe not at the moment, but at some stage on Twitter, the top 10 trending hashtags, and try and get your computer to read them out. But if you put then in each word a capital letter at the top of it, that's called camel case, because it goes like this. And then that makes it a lot easier for the screen readers then to be able to say, well, this is actually what they're saying here. So it's a very small thing, but I now, because it's in my head, notice it whenever companies are doing it, and I think, right, well, that's someone who's really giving it a go.
I think like it strikes me that there's so much to do. You know, like even as a founder or as an employer, small business, large business, whatever, there's so much that can be done. And we've talked about, you know, it's commitment to showing up and showing that you value diversity and inclusion and you want to create that environment, and that starts from the very beginning. But I would love to hear tips and tricks like that, so practical things that people can consider. So things, some like, for example, in my last comms role, I learned about captions. First off, with videos are so important, and particularly with how we talk. Like, I don't know, often many people would really struggle. Kufa, you're doing really well keeping up with all these stuff. But captions, and then also image descriptions for those that are visually impaired. So I'd love to hear some tips like that people can do now and can do then that will actually make a difference to a wider audience.
Well, I mean, as I say, the camel case one is one that I have only recently heard of. Auto-generating captions on your videos. I would say, particularly with our accent again, go and review the auto-generated captions before you post them to anything. It's genuinely one of my favorite things. If you watch TV and have the subtitles on, particularly with the news, and it's someone from here speaking, they just get it all wrong. Which can be quite funny, but it does make you think maybe we could be doing better than this for people who are having to rely on these. And I guess off the top of my head, well, I suppose coming back to considering your physical space, and that's you know, important for a lot of different reasons across a lot of diversity characteristics. To come back to language as well, it's something that, you know, like this was a camel case thing, you're not going to know until you know. So being part of discussion groups, being part of forums, you know, if there's diversity networks, if there's diversity events, if you've got access to the lovely Jemma, you know, just put yourself in those conversations as much as possible, and you'll learn things you didn't know you need to learn. I suppose is for me, just be part of the conversation. And the other bit, which I suppose isn't so much a doing as a feeling, but get comfortable being uncomfortable. If you're having these conversations and you're always comfortable, you're probably not in the right conversations. If you know, truly need to start from scratch learning something, it will be a bit cringe, because you're like, I've said that, I've not thought, and I've maybe not made a consideration here, and that's okay. That's part of that continuous learning process. I think if you're really committed to inclusion, you have to have those conversations where sometimes you'll be told, actually, that's not right at all, or you could be doing a lot better here. But that's how we grow, right?
And also what we've done, I mean, again, this is for founders, you know, each stage as you're scaling your business and growing your business, there's certain parts that come into play. So for instance, we're looking at our rebrand, marketing, and a new website and all that type of stuff. So the person heading up our marketing side, you know, part and parcel of her responsibility as we build that, is to try and make sure that our website and messaging and everything else feeds across everything that we're trying to do as a business, where we stand, but also the end user who are going to use and view that website. So for instance, we were talking to one of our advisors who kind of said, oh, when you kind of thinking of the colors that you're going to use, just think about color blindness. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, yeah, you know, that kind of thing. And the same thing they were doing with the product and how we're using it. When we did our explainer video, you know, the captions piece came into play when the team basically went, oh, we've got two that we're going to do. We're going to do one with captions, one without, and we're going to have different pace behind the different ones that have the captions and all that type of stuff. So as a startup founder, because you're spinning so many different plates, and this is truly a minefield, and it's something that you'll be learning about every single day. It's just trying to look at that piece of work that you're doing in your startup. How is that reflecting back into what Jemma mentioned, the foundations, end user? And if you're looking at your offices, you know, what are we going to have right now based on the potential talent pools that will come into our organization, etc. So yeah, that's how I've kind of approached it, because otherwise it's a lot to take on and trying to just work out everything. You know, it's the same thing with the recruitment process. As Jemma said, you know, the minute you start recruiting, get yourself around employment law, understand what that means, all that type of stuff. But sometimes you might not be thinking about it when it's just yourself and your co-founder and your product, and that's okay as well. But just doing it at the right time.
And I think, because obviously we are a startup that talks about diversity, but we are also a startup. So whenever we were starting to build out our team, obviously a lot of our money is reinvested into salaries and building products, and we're looking financially, okay, well, what can we use for, you know, our internally here, where can we invest in? And the big one for us was communication. So you know, if you're a founder just about to begin your journey and building out your team, your financial resources aren't going to be that in comparison to a major corporation where you can throw thousands of pounds at this. You might only have a couple of £100. So look at your communication tools to allow for flexible remote working. So using Slack, it's free, and there's your, you know, internal comms and your video meetings, and everything can be managed through that. Also includes different tools on your interview software. So there is one in particular, it's being built here, called Equities. It's a fantastic tool which allows you to interview people remotely, and it's got that talk to text enabler as well. So if you are speaking to people maybe with a thicker accent or for the visual impaired, it will actually be there for you to view, and it's recorded as well. So again, back to that legal obligations, just in case you weren't aware, if whenever you are interviewing people, you have to keep that data for 2 years. So that piece of software will keep you compliant, GDPR compliant, and under employment law as well. Different other tools, obviously diversetalent.ai. Let us help you. Just a wee plug there. But there is a long list of different tools that aren't going to break the bank. Being an ethical employer, supporting your employees' wellness, it doesn't need to be expensive. We've been able to do it. We're a permanent team of 8. So, you know, it doesn't need to be thousands of pounds. That's where I really want to emphasize that point, is that don't be thinking, oh gosh, this is going to cost me a fortune. It's not.
Yeah, and I suppose just to kind of continue on around the sort of the interview process and the different amendments you can make as well, and to kind of return to your point around neurodiversity, whoever's, you know, doing your conversations, doing your hiring, I think it's so worth investing some time in understanding the full range of what that means. I think some people hear neurodiversity, that's autism, that means these 3 things, whereas in reality there are a whole range of different diagnosable conditions, or, you know, spectrums as well as the autistic spectrum. And I think that understanding as at the very minimum what all those different things mean and what that experience can be like for people, but also asking if someone's, you know, coming to you for interview and it's something that you're not necessarily au fait with, you know, the different ins and outs of that, just ask, is there anything we can do to make you more comfortable? You know, do you want cameras on, cameras off? Would you prefer, you know, a couple more interviewers? Would you prefer just one-on-one? You know, it can be anything. And I think even just that awareness around accommodation, I think interviews can just be so stressful. And I think if you've got additional challenges on top of that, it's not giving anyone a fair run for it. And I think if you can imagine someone neurotypical trying to do an interview with the sort of same conditions that it feels like normally for someone with, you know, any number of conditions, they couldn't do it, but it's something that we can actually, or, as recruitment teams or whoever's doing your interviewing, all it takes, ask the question, what's going to help here, what's going to make you more comfortable if it's something that's disclosed. If it's not something potentially that someone's disclosed and you find out halfway through the interview, actually, I can't do this because, stop, take a break, let them, which obviously depends on what it is, but just keep asking the questions and don't second guess. And don't, one thing that I have genuinely heard before is that it's giving someone an advantage or a step up, or they're saying this to kind of cheat the interview.
Yeah.
It's like if someone's saying that this is hard for me, because listen to them and make it easier. If you want the right people,
Yeah.
you need to create an environment that's going to work for them.
Sorry, not being rude,
Most
off my
people
parking.
don't even want to say that in the
Yeah.
first place, generally do.
Yeah,
It's very rare someone's making that up.
yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Oh, absolutely. And the fact that someone could even imagine that they would. And I think as well as creating space for that initial conversation as well, it's giving all your candidates space to say, if you've got, would you like any amendments for this interview? Don't just make it things like, you need an access ramp, or, I'll need a translator or something. Just get, is there anything that we can do as interviewers to make you more comfortable? Or, it's, as you say, people are reluctant to admit these things anyway, but if you're able to make it, again, to return to psychological safety, a space where you're actually welcoming that information, saying we are here to help and, and to support and make this as comfortable for you, then it makes it, I think, an easier place for people to have that conversation.
Massively, and I don't want to scare any employers either, but and it goes back about making those reasonable adjustments and talking about employment law. And there was a case in this country recently where a job seeker went for a public sector position. They were represented by another recruitment agency, and nobody had asked this candidate throughout the process, do you need any reasonable adjustments? Do you need any support through the interview process? And then whenever they got to the end and didn't get the position, towards the end of their interview process, they said, oh, actually, I'm dyslexic and I do actually need support for this.
Yeah.
And the case was they didn't get the job, they were dismissed and said, oh no, they don't make any reasonable adjustments. The case was taken up by the Equality Commission and the candidate won thousands of pounds because it was discrimination. So again, back to that employment law piece, be mindful about your responsibilities. The Equality Commission will always be on your side if there is no evidence from the employer to suggest otherwise. So 100%.
Does anybody else have any questions just as we close off, or even Aoife, see you're online, and Annette as well? Feel free to share if you do have any questions.
I've got a question that I don't know if it really has an answer, or if it's a really hard answer. But kind of touching on what you said, like I was born and raised here, so now Belfast is like 100% different than when I went to school. But certainly when I was a teenager and going into like your first few jobs, like in the cafe and Dundonald High School, like everyone was wonderful, like everyone was lovely. But with the best will in the world, I couldn't help sometimes feeling like a token. And it's like no one ever made me feel that way. It's almost certainly because of my own like insecurity about it. But as much as I would appreciate, like my current employer is great, like as much as I would appreciate them being, good with whether it was health or religion or anything, I would hate to have like loads of attention and almost kind of mollycoddled, if that makes sense. Like you just want to be like everyone else. And I think probably a lot of I know from my own circle, like friends who are in the workforce, that they feel the same. Like you don't want to be singled out because you're like, God, So it's probably like a personality thing, like no one's making you feel like a token. But like my last company, it was 70 people, and I was the only one, who wasn't like Caucasian. So it was, you can't help feel like that. So where would you see the line of, being as supportive as you can, but not kind of singling that person out? And I suppose maybe it would be more evident in a startup, because if you've got like 15 employees and only one person is perhaps not like from a Northern Irish background, is there anything that an employer could do to not make them feel like a token, even if they don't feel like that? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think this is a very fine line. And one of my friends, Helena, who worked in PwC with me, she wrote a full article about this like last year. She says that she'd been in Northern Ireland most of her life since her childhood, and it was just so used to every room she walked into being the only Chinese face and to be seen, and very aware of if there was events coming up in the calendar, she's like, right, I'll just wait for the email here and they'll ask me to come up and speak at something. Do you know what I mean? And and I think that you do sometimes get companies that can be quite selective in choosing who they want to have.
Yeah.
I think there's a place for promoting diversity in the likes of panels and in different teams and everything else, but I think it is a difficult one in terms of wanting to support someone and not wanting to single someone out. I think line management and career coaches, or whatever variation of that you have within your organization, and you talk about your employer, so that's a conversation around making sure that for example, if I was your line manager, potentially just checking in around things like that. Is there anything more that we could be doing? Are you happy enough? Would you like, if, for example, there was an event coming up, or if you were organizing something with a network or whatever it was, do you want any more support? Do you want a hands-off approach? I think it's always, as far as possible, not trying to make, particularly in front of everyone, a whole big, probably more eloquent about this, but make a whole big thing about it. But ask, is there anything that we can do to support? Ask, is there anything are you happy in terms of your team, the way you're treating everything else? And if the person that is working for you is saying, actually, no, I'm really happy, it's sweet, it's fine, maybe work on your hiring a bit so there's a bit more diversity in the workforce. But yeah, I think it again comes down to listening. I don't think it's something where you need to schedule a meeting specifically need to ask about, how is your diversity and inclusion experience going? But I think that's why you need open channels of communication between, as again, your managers, your coaches. Having inclusion be part of the conversation means that should come out naturally. If you're getting that right, it will come out. If there's more that you can't be doing, if you're getting it right, if the person's experience is actually great and they've got great people around them who support them. But I can totally see where that is a blurry one.
Well,
I don't think
your friend again. I'd like to add her on LinkedIn.
Helena
She would
Chan.
probably have a lot.
Yeah, honestly, she's brilliant. She's actually really into inclusion and diversity and networks as well. I'll connect you afterwards and send, because I just think she's fab. I actually bumped into her last week. She seems to be getting on great, but she's written quite a few articles about her experience and her parents' experience and what it was like for her at school and what it's like for her now working. I think she's still at PwC. So I find it really interesting and really enlightening, but she actually found it really difficult to talk about her heritage and her background because she didn't necessarily want the spotlight and she didn't want all that focus on her. But she was like, if I don't, then there's probably other people out there that feel the same and feel like they're on their own. So it's sort of, it depends on how much that individual wants to be. I mean, as you say, you don't want to be representation or representative of an entire, demographic, but to share your experience, I think, can be a really powerful thing. And certainly for her, she had a lot of people reach out to her, and it was a little bit of the, I thought it was only me kind of thing. And I think her network became a lot more, I don't know, engaged, and she got a lot from it as well in terms of having those conversations and organizing informal networks outside the workplace as well.
Yeah. I did that a lot as a teenager as well. It's like, rather than kind of be proud of it, it's like, well, where are you from?
Yeah.
I'm from Orangefield. There's nothing interesting.
Yeah.
but rather than actually make it like a really cool conversation.
Yeah.
And it's not even necessarily, the other person is being awful about it, it's just genuine curiosity.
Yeah.
I think I've shut that down quick.
Yeah.
Just because you don't want to talk about it. But now I think Belfast city centre is so different. Like, it's mental. Like, when I'm getting the bus in, because I went to Matiya, like literally just up the road, and getting the bus, home, it's so different to what it is now.
Definitely.
But it's, I think it's just nice to hear that there's other, I'm sure there's loads, like, but when you grow up in the city centre, it's, you just kind of shut that down.
Yeah.
like Chinese New Year, what's that?
Yeah.
It reminds me, thing but totally different. I was a token gay in the office, and my previous employer threw a gay pride party, surprise party, without me knowing until I walked into the office and there was rainbow flags, and I turned straight away. I was like, I cannot work here. And was even brought out to the outside of the building, which I completely hadn't realised that they also put flags out the windows in Belfast city centre. And was like, so you love it? Can you write an article so we can put this out on, on LinkedIn? And I was scundered and embarrassed, and just was like, I don't want to ever talk about my authentic self ever again. I'm not going to be telling you what I'm doing at the weekends with my partner. I'm not going to be talking to you about, with car friend and what I get up to, because that's me, that's myself. I don't want you, using me and my brand for self-promotion.
That's a big telling thing of a company when they want to hold you up as their token.
Yeah.
But if you don't feel comfortable, and I remember I had this experience once where, as a leader, someone had to be seen to be all inclusive and all, celebrating everyone. But anytime I mentioned Freudian slip, mentioned my wife's name, she's online, someone get shouted up that. But anytime I mentioned my wife's name or our plans or what we were doing, or holidays we were going on, he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He couldn't look me in the eye. He was looking down. And I was like, can I swear as channel 4? I can't shit. Don't talk like you are, so supportive and so inclusive. But if you're making people feel, and he would also make gay jokes at one of the guys in our office who he did happen to be straight, but he wore boat shoes and he wore nice stuff. Like, he was great. But he would, I will not go into details, but he would always make like little flippant put downs all around him being gay. It was like, you just don't see the correlation here between what you're saying to your company, your department, and what you're saying at this desk, and that will travel. So I think authenticity is key.
Possibly, Laura.
I mean, and this is probably going a bit beyond kind of what today is about, but people, their reactions to things are really just a product of like their environments and their experiences, and that in turn helps people like us in the others, with the other shoe on, to be more cognizant, to be more understanding. They just at this point don't get it. And I think right across the whole spectrum of diversity, this is what we've been talking about. It's about understanding that people don't feel the way you feel. People are different, and appreciating those differences, respecting them, and letting people come to the table and feel comfortable in their differences, and just realizing that we are all just like people at the end of the day. So I suppose for me, and it would be lovely to hear if anybody else has any kind of key takeaways from today, it's really just for me, it's really,
for interrupted people.
You're absolutely fine. It's just about being open and being authentic, and starting it now and building those foundations for the future, and being genuine about it. And it looks like,
I think as well, like you were saying about like neurodivergency, that there's a whole kind of broad range there. So I'm autistic and ADHD. That's where my knowledge stops as the expert. I want people with how they live that maybe I don't fully understand to inform me. I don't want to be responsible for knowing that. And that's one thing I've noticed. Because there's a lot of experts in autism that have a degree. We're getting it wrong. And I think a lot of that is like there's more talk of talking to people about it, because that's where you'll get the on point answer. And also I think there's such a rise in like females especially, but I am concerned there's going to be a gray area of autism and things it's going to be forgotten about, where because I know someone who is trans and autistic, and they had a huge amount of problems of doctors not understanding that they actually were more female autistic and things like that. And like I've had conversations with this person, and like I've said to them, like trans community would be a big thing, and I've noticed even LGBT wise that's quite common in the neurodivergent community as well. And I'm not straight either, so I'm more than happy to stand up and be a leader. Like, do you know what's quite interesting? I never had a problem coming out because I was more ostracized in my autism. That coming out was nothing to me, which is interesting, but I've heard that's just my experience and stuff. So I always find like an interest, because for a while I was like, why did I not like find it as scary? But it was more scary for me coming out as autistic because I was so ostracized, because it's so hard to hide as well too. But just being open to, like myself, I'm still learning, and some of these accommodations may need to change sometimes, or they might be in that stage where they think this might work, and maybe it doesn't, and then I have to try a couple of things, and it's having that patience of, but you said your needs for this, sometimes they can change too, as well. Keep that in mind in case people might go, oh, I thought the needs were fine. too, sort of thing.
And I think as well, when you talk about like people having degrees in, you know, autism research or diagnosis, whatever else, if you just did that, which, you know, my mum did years and years ago, and stopped learning there, you would be so far stuck in the past now. Anything like that, that there is still ongoing research and we're still trying to understand. My sister is autistic as well, and she obviously has learned a lot more from that than she could do from any qualification. But as you say, there's different, you know, experiences for every person. I think that's the other thing, that people make a mistake. And as you say, it is different for men, it's different for women. It'll be different for people who are somewhere in between that sort of spectrum. But I think it's trying to, as far as possible, if it is something that, you know, you've got a real keen interest in, stay on top of like kind of developments and research and everything else. But as you say, it's asking people who it directly affects, understanding them. And I think particularly, I'm fascinated by the intersection of neurodiversity and the LGBT community, and could talk about it all day. I just think it's fascinating. But, you know, for anything like that, if things shift, if something changes, if someone's requirements change, or if, you know, the medical profession's entire stance on something changes, just try your best to keep up and to understand. And as you say, there's that many different types of neurodivergence, you couldn't know them all. And I think if you know that, for example, to bring it back to, I know I go off on tangents a lot and probably should have a wee buzzer every time I do, as employers, you know, if you know that you've someone coming into the workplace who has Asperger's or has AS or ADHD or whatever it is, for that moment, that's your focus, trying to understand as much of that as you can, trying to get to grips with what that means, what that feels like. Could flexible working help that person? Is remote working going to be preferable? I mean, you know, try and wrap your head around it. But I think what should always lead your efforts before you do anything is talk to the person, like they'll know best. So yeah, it's like a lot of what we talked about, it's going to be constantly shifting. And I think, like everything, people understand when you're trying. I think people can always tell if you're, you know, if you're making mistakes, or if you're consistently showing yourself to not make any effort. People know that straight away. You're making mistakes, but your intentions are good, your intentions are there, you're making the effort, people will still appreciate that and will help you get it right as well.
Absolutely. Amazing. That's if nobody else has any questions. Oh no, absolutely, please go ahead.
So our employers do encourage the LGBT and like an expression group. And obviously it's a startup group, but stemming from obviously everybody working from home and not feeling comfortable like being around strange environments and things, we were introduced to it was like some formatting of a guide to me, and it was like introducing people coming back into the office, like I don't like a lot of noise, you know, I don't drink coffee, I don't like big crowds, and I just thought it was a really nice way for people to adapt to coming into the office. So obviously it's not for everybody, but it was a really nice touch that if someone wanted to create like a page on me or a guide to me when they come to the office, or if they are having like a really busy time, or if they feel like they just don't want to be a people person for that day, they can put a little link up for that day and just be like, this is my guide, this is how I'm feeling today. And if anybody comes like and like interacts with them, and they may say, just before you speak to me today, I'm not feeling great, I'm not taking it out on you, but had bad news, or had this, or you know, had a really bad day, I didn't sleep or whatever. It could be really minor, but people obviously take it to heart, you know, because we are people pleasers in this country. Like we want everybody to be happy, we want everybody to feel comfortable. And even me the other day, I was on a conference call, and I literally come on to my team and was like, I'm really sorry, I didn't sleep, I'm a grump, I feel like Oscar the Grouch, I just want to get in a bin and not talk to anybody, and I'm in recruitment and I can't not talk to anybody. But they all gave me like the space. They were just like, do you know what, Jess, that's not you usually, so we appreciate you telling us, and if you need anything you can do that. I'm quite close to my team, so it's good, but anybody who is running a startup or who is working remotely or works from home, I thought that was a really good way of communicating without having to have that face-to-face pressure of saying, I don't really feel good today, because we aren't that way. We like to be happy all the time, and I just thought it was a really good invention for someone to roll out. You know,
really good research.
Because no one's perfect and no one has the best day of their lives every day. So I just thought that was really good. And for neurodiversity or you know, I don't like certain language, or I'm Christian and I don't believe in swearing, or I don't drink, or I don't. It's just nice to know without having that awkward conversation first and foremost.
Absolutely.
It's more about awareness and how you approach that person, and they feel more comfortable without having to sit there and go, I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other, and then you end up putting a label on it, because that uncomfortableness is like, okay, now where do we go with this?
Yeah.
You just read it and then you're like, okay, I know
I
that I
get
can say
that
this,
person a
or
bit more.
it helps you a bit with the knowledge. So as a startup company, I think that's quite a good idea that they have something like that. Obviously it doesn't take a lot. You could draft it up on like a Word document or a wee sheet of likes and dislikes or things that make me uncomfortable. But after COVID, it helped quite a lot of people that we find, you know, just in general, that their mental health weren't right, or they come in and like, I'm not used to busy offices. I would come in an office on a Monday and a Friday because it's quieter. Wednesday, Thursday, don't ring me after 3. I'm picking up the kids, or you know, and it's just things like that, like about general awareness, which was really good. So I just wanted to share that.
I love
Thank you
that.
very much for sharing.
We did something similar in my last team. And we were
Sorry to interrupt, Laura. Kufa has to shoot on. I just saw you sent a message, but I just want to give him a big thanks. Because it was really insightful, really rich conversation that we've had. So thank you, Kufa.
No, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Apologies, Laura.
No, you're right. I was going to say we had something similar in my last team, and we were a really close team. So a lot of it was stuff we knew, but it came down to even little things like when I'm overextended, when I'm really stressed out, don't do this, or you know, I get satisfaction from my job, or I like when people, or you know, there's some of the positive stuff as well. I think there's so much to be had from it, even outside of, you know, diversity in the traditional sense that we think about it. And happy to admit, you know, the 3 of us, we sat written brown and answer all the questions. And actually I do have a template for that if anyone would like a look at the kind of questions we asked. I'll send it across to you, sure you can disseminate it. But we actually cried during our conference. Like, we were very close. But we cried during, like, it was like, do you know what, we've been working together and I didn't know that, you know, I have issues with my sleep as well, and I would have told them, look, got 3 hours last night. I will do my best, but I will not be at my most productive. That's fine. We're all people. Or I'm actually feeling really anxious today. Can I miss this meeting because I don't want to sit and talk about this? Or you know, and I think something like that is not necessarily your questionnaire or your fact sheet. I think it's if you can create, and I think early doors is a great time to do that, because even if you do get people joining them, they're coming into that culture and feeling safe. If you can get your culture right early on, that people can have those conversations, that you can tell your manager that you had a panic attack on the way in today, or that actually the person who sits 3 desks down or 3 Zoom screens down said something that really upset you. Can we address it? Can we do something about it and move on? That culture of openness, safety, and vulnerability, which I think you need to model as a leader, just the benefits from that just keep snowballing the bigger you get, and you know, the more you try and do. If your people really feel like they've got each other's back, there's nothing you can't do.
Fantastic. I think that's what we all, like, as leaders or even employees, should aspire to, is to be open and to create that safe environment for people. Fabulous. Thank you both very much.
Thank
I hope
you.
you all enjoyed that session.
Can I do a quick plug before I go?
Oh, go on ahead, Laura. That's why you're here.
So and then sort of like along the themes of inclusion and diversity and connection as well. I think it's great to build a local network too. We're as PA Consulting going to start a quarterly diversity and inclusion themed book club, where we're going to assign a book based on a theme that's sort of relevant for around that period. And I generally do kind of go by the calendar dates. It's quite useful for wee nudges for different things. So we're actually starting, the first book club is going to be on the 27th of October. And it's going to be from 4 to 5. And the book that we've chosen for it, and I'll send the details over to Eva Jane, and she can make sure that everyone gets the details. But for October is obviously, as everyone knows, it's Black History Month in the UK. So we're going to focus on a book called Race After Technology by Ruha Benjamin. And it's kind of all about the sort of how AI and robotics and everything else, how racism can actually sneak into that and disadvantage people from different ethnicities and backgrounds. And from a tech and design point of view, how important diversity at the table is there. And obviously there's a much more eloquent synopsis of it online on Goodreads. But if anyone would care to join us, we have yet to decide whether it's going to be one that's virtual or in person. I am a big fan of in person, so I love connecting with people and stuff like this. I think from an accessibility point of view, digital is great, so we'll probably end up doing a blended thing. But if you would like to read along with us. We'll get like a little chat group going, and then we'll have in the PA offices and then online as well, just a little catch up, doing our what did you take away from the book, what are the key things, what surprised you, and let's be honest, we'll probably go for pints afterwards.
Great.
That's a great idea. Though. I have a book in mind. I could recommend these as well. I haven't even read it.
I think we'll have a lot to talk
She's
about.
I think she's just published it, but it's a girl called. Yeah, also a good tip actually if you're ever curious about learning it, because one of my special interests is human biology and conditions and disabilities. There's so many people on YouTube that live these things that have their own channels, and you can learn. I have learned so much about like there's a girl who is blind, like with EDS. There's so many things on there that you might actually find that useful too.
Yeah.
Because I've learned things where I was just like, I didn't even know that. Now I do.
Yeah.
Sort of thing as well. But that girl, Chloe Hayden, she's from Australia. She wrote a book. I think it's called something like Not Weird, Just Different. She's autistic and ADHD. But she's great. Fantastic channel to go to actually.
There you go. That's next month's book sort of, or next series of books.
Yeah, because I don't know if it's fully out yet. I seen her put up a wee video and she's freaking out. She's holding a book. So
Thank you very much. I really hope you enjoyed that session. I think it's a really important topic that we're talking about, and that really just does infiltrate into every part of our lives, and one that I think we're all, I suppose, responsible for in one way or another in our roles and in our lives. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's lots. There's lots of stuff going on at Raise. If it's your first time here, you're very welcome. I do hope you enjoyed it. We're having a number of events over the next couple of months. Next week, we are talking to a local founder who has expanded his business into the US, a guy called Stephen Rice from Talent Census. So if anybody's interested in that, please come along. Always a great source of inspiration, the startup stories. And we'll be hosting another one in October time, all around World Mental Health Day. So might well be of interest to you. All of this we'll share with you certainly in a follow-up email, but I'm glad to see everyone and I do hope you enjoyed it, and thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Aoife. Thanks, Annette.
I have to keep an eye on my pocket because I wasn't being rude. I was looking at my phone. I just don't want to pay for any more.
Absolutely makes sense.